right, Carl, the Reverend. How's it going, man? You okay?
Yeah, good. How are you doing, Cheyenne? It's
I'm
a
doing
pleasure.
excellent.
It's a pleasure to be on Iblis this time around because last two times had you on Sol Nox, so it's cool to have you to be on your podcast now. So
That's it. Yeah, no, it's cool, man. Those couple of chats that we had on Sol Nox were really good fun, and I think it's only about time that I have you on. I mean, how's things up in Colorado? How you doing?
yeah, not too bad. Working and all the bullshit, trying to trying to get the energy, have the energy to do your music and your art and all the stuff you need to do, but it's like it's the eternal battle, right?
Oh man, tell me about it.
So, like trying to get
Yeah.
home and be like, do I want to just lay down and like you're like, exhausted from day of work? Like, do I just want to lay down and just like watch a movie, or do I want to get up and like try to make sure I get my shit done? You know what I mean? It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. For me, there's no off switch button at all. Like, I actually struggle a lot chilling out. I struggle watching films or anything. I'm constantly on the go, and the problem is, when you've got a creative mind as well, it's like you start doing something normal, quote in quotation marks, you start doing that, and then like 5 seconds in, you get an idea that comes into your head. Oh, I should say this to so and so. Oh, I should write this down. Oh, I should write that riff. And then it's just like it never stops. It just keeps on turning until you fall asleep. And even when you're trying to go to sleep, there's some fucking idea that comes up. It's like, oh yeah, you should probably do that. So such is the way, eh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like I alternate between the two. Like I have the time, but I think it's also depending on my work and like all times where I'm like real inspired and I just want to work on stuff, get things done, and then there's other times where it's like you know, I mean, after 6 days of work in a row and you're fucking brutalized, you're just like exhausted. So, but my work's also, I mean, my work is basically, 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours of workout every day. So,
Okay, what is it that you actually do for work, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah, I deliver, for FedEx. So,
All right,
like,
cool.
yeah, so I'm out there in the great outdoors every day, delivering packages and shit. So,
Yeah, I know you get a lot of steps in doing that, and
yeah. And you lift
yeah.
stuff. I mean, it was good that I was lifting weights before I started doing it because, but that something about lifting all the odd shapes because when you're lifting weights and stuff, I mean everything's pretty balanced. It's
Sure.
finally honed to like work on certain muscles. But when you're like lifting like 100-pound box that's not like shaped quite right for you to pick it up, but you got to move it, you know, it works out some different muscles than you usually use, like even when you're working out. You know what I mean? So it's
I've
kind of good.
Yeah, I've been in that position before. It's like when you've got a body bag, but then the person's got a really fat head, so you kind of got to balance it on one shoulder, and it's a bit awkward to move around.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
So
Cool,
yeah,
man. Yeah, I know one of my friends actually worked at FedEx, and he said that it was a nightmare for having piss breaks, because sometimes you'll just be in a place where there's nowhere to go, so you just gotta carry around bottles in the side of the van or something like that.
yeah. I have like a big huge like soda cup from like a gas station that is
Sure.
keep like up in the console, and that's that's what I
Yeah,
use, like, cause they just, yeah. I mean,
that's
it's
it.
it's not it's not even worth trying to find a, if you're in the area and you're like, oh, cool, there's a place I can stop real fast, but half of my route there's no bathroom, there's no gas station even really close, and I have to break out of my route. So, I don't really even take a break while I'm working. I just roll through. I
Sure.
mean, other people take breaks. You can do whatever you want, but like I just roll through to get done. I mean, I'll take like little micro breaks where I kind of sit and like check my phone for a couple minutes and then get back to it. But it's like for me that works. Like that's one thing I like about the job is that you're kind of on your own in a way. Like, and that's mostly also because the people who I work for don't sit there and you know look over your shoulder all the time. I'm sure there's people, you know, I'm sure there's contract people holders who look down their driver's shoulders constantly and go, "Oh, what is he doing? What is he doing? Are they doing it fast enough?" I'm sure they do that, right? Because I mean, that's how like Amazon runs their shit, so it's like,
Yeah.
but luckily they're pretty, as long as you get your job done, people I work for are like pretty cool, it's like whatever, do whatever you're gonna do, and just as long as you're getting everything done, right? So I like that kind of independence. I don't,
Mm.
I'm not like for example, older jobs, I always tried to become a manager as fast as possible so I could kind of be like, in charge of my shit, like at least, you're not a store manager, you're the manager of like your shifts or whatever, right? Um, and this job, it's like I don't have to worry about that, you're just kind of like on your own, independent the whole time, right? So I'm more
Mm.
into either being in the leadership role or just being on my own, doing my own thing, because I don't really deal well with being like somebody's underling, you know what I mean?
Bro, 100%. That's like that is me all over, and I've had difficulties with jobs that are sort of okay. It's like everyone else seems fine with it, but then it gets to a certain point where, I mean, I don't get along with rules. I'd never have done, whether I was over in Iran or over here. Rules are just something that I vehemently reject, just the notion of someone else setting outlines or something like that for me. Not only I find it counterproductive because it sort of just kills my motivation to want to do something. It just I almost find it offensive. It's like, how fucking dare you that I have to go and eat my food at this time. Like, fuck you. It's like that's kind of how I think. So hence the reason why I'm extremely striving towards just being my own boss with trial by fire, and obviously Trivax and stuff as well, but it's like you're not in a band to make a living out of it. So it's just about finding that balance, where the least amount of people that I don't mind dealing with people, but I don't like the dynamic of people telling me what to do. As long as I work with people, that's absolutely fine. It's actually something I find quite rewarding, but just don't tell me what to do. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not big on like if I have to be like, the low, the bottom rung person, where you have to
Mm.
just eat up the shit from everybody, you know what I mean, all the managers. And I hate that feeling, like, I won't, because I mean, for a long time I was like a manager for like 13 years or something, right? So you're used to like a certain level of like just what you do, responsibility, and people taking, you're the one telling people what to do and shit. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mm.
then at that point I was like, went to another job where I was the underling for a little bit, and I was like, I couldn't stand it. You know what I mean? And then you have the same feeling of like, but then I found that I liked being out kind of on my own. I mean, I do kind of miss like interacting with people, because they really, I mean, my interaction of people is very minimal now, but maybe the businesses I deliver to and stuff like that, I talk to the people there or whatever. That's about it.
Mm.
I don't have human interaction really while I work anymore, but that kind of is okay for me. I just listen to audiobooks or podcasts or music or whatever, and just like, you're kind of like, you can kind of be in your own world a little bit, which I kind of like about my job now.
It's very black metal of you.
Yeah. It's kind of like Fenner is trying to just working for the postal
Yeah,
service for 40 years or whatever, because he can just listen to his music and be back there sorting mail or whatever. You know what I mean? I guess
that's
it's
it.
kind of similar to that,
Yeah,
right?
the postman pest. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, man. Well, listen, one thing about that's cool is, I think a lot of us just, people of this particular breed of alternative, if you will, it's kind of a hard thing to label because, you become a metalhead, but you can't branch all metalheads together. You can't even branch all black metalheads together. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of us that we kind of go through normal day-to-day life and it just feels like we just about coexist with it at peace just so we can do our own thing, which is to listen to music, but then also explore philosophies and cultures and also the spiritual side of things as we wish, really. And it's kind of like it's an interesting thing. I feel like a lot of us kind of live a double life, really.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that's how I always felt, I always felt kind of like, I'm just trying to, even with just the normal daily life of, the whole world, the way the world is, like paying taxes and this idiocy of the governments and all this stuff that we look at. I just feel like very annoyed with all this stuff sometimes because I've always felt kind of like I don't really interact with it too well. You know what I mean? Like I've always kind of felt like, why are we doing certain things like as a culture, as a people? Because it's just kind of stupid. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know. Sometimes you just want to go back. There's that. I always I think it was always the attraction for me of like stuff like Conan or something like that, where it's just like people back in time where your violence will get you where you need to go. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. But obviously, that's not really the world we live in anymore, right? So we have to
I
kind
think
of bifurcate a little bit.
I think what it is that a lot of people, as much as they probably wouldn't like to admit it, they sort of really they really almost strive on the fact that they have these overlords, these invisible overlords protecting them, keeping them safe, keeping things in order. They always trust that, oh yeah, doesn't matter what happens, the system will always hold my back, and that's just not true. And you see that a lot in the last few years. It's the kind of thing that convinces people to rat out on each other, during times of crisis. Like, for example, I mean, it's 4 years now almost, but when people were having parties in lockdown and the neighbors were like ratting on each other, which, by the way, I think is fucking disgusting behavior. Anyone who did that
Yeah.
needs to seriously look at themselves in the mirror and just take a good deep look at that bullshit fucking behavior. But yeah, it's that thing of you trust that there's some overlord watching you, making sure that you're safe and you're fed and everything is provided, and you get to continue your consumerism. And as long as that still goes on, and then you do what you're told, then everything's gonna be okay. And that's just not the nature of the world. You have to understand that even the people in charge are still humans, and on top of that, they absolutely don't give a shit about you. I bet that the more you're in charge of humanity, the more you're desensitized probably to the idea of death and dying. Because at the end of the day, it just becomes numbers on a paper for you, right? You just become numb
Yeah.
to it anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's the thing people forget about when people become kind of in power, right? That the kind of mentality that can lead to, the Holocaust or whatever, or I
Hmm.
don't know, the kind of stuff that people do where they start like just murdering vast amounts of people. I think that comes from that same thing. You get to a certain point in power where you're so dissociated from the people that they are just numbers on a paper. And so at a certain point, you can just order them dead if you want to. I mean, he had people like Stalin do that all the time, right? So like I was gonna say to you that type of civil government forms of government that encourage people to rat each other out are generally Stalinist communist countries and I guess during
Hmm.
Nazi Germany too, people would rat each other out as well. But that's the kind of governments where people rat each other out. So, all those people who were ratting each other out during COVID were just acting like, you know, all those kinds of people in some totalitarian government, right?
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I think that there's a balance with that as well. Like, let's say if you know that someone is stealing something from someone, that's a different case. But this is not it. I think that what that does is that I think there's a clear difference to me is that that let's say the example of ratting out on your neighbors for like just gathering with family. I think to me that's a real divide between people, because those are the people that you should be, if anything, you should be organizing with them. You should be more of a community with them. But the fact that you're selling your own community for the sake of some invisible overlords that you expect to have your back for you, But just going back to the idea of what you were saying as well about the sort of the very extreme levels of what this kind of system can lead to. Our mutual friend Jackie said it to me the best. He said that it's not hate that causes it, but rather it's indifference, and that's something that I've actually come to think about a lot as of late, especially, for example, just seeing the Iranian government and how seamlessly they are executing young people left and right, just for rising against them or just for saying something online or just for posting certain pictures, and that's someone's child, and then they're just hanging them at at just a simple order, and it seems so seamless to them that they're not even phased by it at all. And I think that is the indifference, because to them they have that, I guess, divine mission, so it's very hard to care about something like that. And it's something that always continues to baffle me. And I'm almost glad that I don't understand that mindset. Almost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the mindset of fanatics, right? You
Mm.
know, and that fanaticism is creates an indifference, because it creates a indifference to anybody else aside from what you believe, right? So it's like, you as a fanatic say, everybody in the world should believe what I believe, and if you don't, I want to kill you. It's just as simple as that, right? I mean, that has always been the modus operandi of Islam, right? And even Christianity before it. It's like, if you don't believe, then I'll cut your throats. So it's like, I mean, I know a lot of people have made that, given that choice, they were like, well, yeah, sure, I'll do what you want, and then I'll just secretly worship what you worship before. You can see like that with like the Sufis and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But I always think about that fanaticism is really a big part of it, and that helps create that, particularly with something like like Iran, or the type of attacks in Israel and all the kind of stuff that goes on, with all that stuff. And that is a mindset that I don't understand. Never have. I've always been baffled by this. People, I mean, how can you kill somebody just because they believe something different from you? And there's always been something that, I guess, to my heathen mind doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I feel that. I feel that. And, I think that I acknowledge that it's a primitive part of us. I acknowledge that it's something that's existed within nature since the dawn of time, that there's always this sort of duality, like I always come back to this phrase from the Bible: man was made in the image of God, and that's one of my favorite lines. I look at the world under the guise of that. Now, you can define God however way you wish, but it's something that makes a lot of sense to me. But in the same token, you can see that duality within God, that it's always trying to conquer itself to be the most perfect version of itself, and somehow it never really gets there. Like, there's never a perfect moment in our world. There's never a perfect fighter, there's never a perfect football team, or there's never any perfect country. It's always sort of, we only just get close to it. And to me, I like to I like to sort of relate that to the idea of God, because it's the wholeness of it all. And I feel like that there's conflict there, that there's conflict within God, that it's always trying to find a perfect version of itself. You see that in deers, or where they're fighting with their antlers, or with moose rather. And I think that there's something fascinating there. And I guess the same principle is what within the human consciousness is trying to take over everything else, because we think we're better. Like, I'm like that with everything that I do, and I recognize it, and it terrifies me, because I'm like, oh shit, so everyone else is like this too. And this is how we end up creating tribes and teams, which, as powerful as it is, may very well also be the thing that might actually lead to our demise. And it's something that scares me. It scares me. It's almost like, we've avoided conflict for so long. Well, not even really avoided it, but in a sense, it feels like we have, and it almost feels like we've just made everything worse. And now it's made room for a brewing of the worst conflict we have ever known, and that scares me. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's almost a part of me that does feel like that conflict and is an inherent part of reality of nature, you know. So, I mean, even
Yeah.
if like, I'm a big practitioner of like the runes. A big part of the idea with the runes is that you have to have this conflict, destruction, and stuff to create new change. Like friction is part of one of the inherent principles of creation, right? So, unfortunately, this is the way that the world works, and there's some aspects to it where, you do feel like we could go past that kind of in some ways, right? Like we could, at least as far as society goes, like there really wouldn't be any real need for each other to kill. There's really no need for humans to kill each other. You can do conflict and can create change and stuff in other ways, but I think that it's the vast majority of humans are just too like low. I don't know if this is gonna sound horrible, but they're just too asleep, I guess, in some way. They're too overruled by the this kind of darkness and this kind of side of them, right? Like this kind of blind animal passions and stuff like that. So I do think that that's part of it. They're overruled by this kind of magnetic type of energies that causes them to have conflict with each other. So I
That's
think
really interesting. That's very interesting that you say that, because the way I sort of come to understand the idea of nature is that it demands for a flattening always. It demands for um, sort of like clearing the slate. And now, what do I mean by that? It means that somehow there's this, I don't know, and this is perhaps maybe just my own interpretation of it, but it is one I believe in very strongly, and it's that nature, or even the idea of God, or whatever it is you want to call it, it seems to have the need for a harvesting of death. Now, what do I mean by that? It's that it almost feels like it's a natural part of the cycle which we're involved with. And the more you go against it, the bigger its future appearance grows. So it's almost like there's this energetic thing around our world that's like, feed me death. And if you don't feed it enough death, it will come and it'll take even more. It'll come and even do more damage. Like it's this thing that we somehow are supposed to have a relationship with. That's why when we did the song Azrael for Trivax, yeah, the relationship that that song has with death is basically giving it its own will, and hey, come and take all this with you, which is in essence a blasphemous thing, because Israel is not supposed to exist outside of Allah. But the way I look at it, just as far as nature itself is concerned, I think that there's this vibe, there's this feeling, there's this thing, it's this karmic energy. You can look at it as life events, or, because you can also define death in multiple dimensions as well, right? And multiple different manifestations of it. It could simply be just at the form of a loss, it can be just at the form of a defeat, or whatever, I guess. But I think that nature demands it, and yeah, somehow it always balances itself out, just like the law of gravity is always a certain thing. I feel like this is always a certain thing as well, is that when you've got life, you need to have death, and the world sometimes somehow just calls for it out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, you think about so before like World War One, for example, there was a period of kind of, I mean, you had the Franco-German War in like 1870 or whatever, when the Prussian Franco-Prussian War, where the Prussians had like basically dominated France and
Yeah.
made them did all this stuff. And so, but you had a period of 40, 50 years of pretty much peace across Europe. There was a lot of this hope of this idea of cosmopolitan Europe, where people were, not only citizens of their country but citizens of Europe. This is like when those kinds of ideas really started. Um, and it was a big flowering of art and stuff, but a lot of people felt like something was wrong, and particularly in the period right before World War One, that particularly about the 10, 5-10 years leading up to it. You know, Carl Jung, for example, was on a train in like Switzerland or something like that, and he had some vision of just like this building storm, like this pressure over Europe that he thought was going to break and become a war. He had this vision, and this was before the war even started. And he just got in some type of weird state, and saw this kind of pressure that you're talking about building over Europe. And wrote about it. And it's pretty interesting. I forget what the writing is called exactly, but I think he even discusses this idea in his writing about Wotan as well. And you think about that, like that was only like 40, 50, 40, 50 years, right? Since the previous war. There's been constant war in certain parts of the world, but if you think about Asia, the vast majority of Asia and has been like if you think about China and all that stuff, that's been war free since post World War II, except for the war. Yeah, like the war in Korea, or in Vietnam, right? But that's like still over by 70s. So that you've had 50 years there. You've had 70 years since World War II ended for Europe. Um, and I think part of what it takes is it also takes the people who if you looked at the total, if anybody looks at the total destruction that occurred in Europe for World War II, no one would really want to see that happen again, right? But I think that a lot of the kids nowadays they're not raised with any type of historical understanding at all. They're not
Yeah.
raised. A lot of schools nowadays aren't teaching kids anything about World War II at all, or the Holocaust, or anything that happened in that time, because it's too scary for them. And so, like, if
Yeah, and
you're
they
like
just
not
teach him bullshit instead.
yeah, if you're not teaching people about the fact that, yeah, we can fucking murder the fuck out of each other and destroy cities now. And this is World War II, and they flattened Dresden and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be 1,000 times worse now, right? But
The way
I
I
mean,
look at it now is this. If something kicked off, you know how if someone that if someone passes away, you go on Facebook and write a statement and pay homage to them. If that happened, so many people would go that you wouldn't be able to fit all of their names into one post. And that's going to be all people that you know if it's not yourself. And that's the reality of things that people really need to grasp their minds around, that's we're sitting just on the edge of that, and it's getting ever so slippery.
yeah, and I am doubtful that any of the main combatants are going to like spring straight to nuclear war. You know what I mean? Just because I do think a lot of people are a little hesitant, even psychopaths like President Biden or something like that. I think are hopefully somewhat hesitant about using those types of things, right? But
I don't think that cunt even knows where he is.
I don't think so either. But hopefully, I would imagine that I think maybe the countries that are most likely to use nuclear weapons are places like Iran and North Korea for whatever
Hmm.
reason. Even though I don't know what that is, because why those kind of countries, because those are the countries that will very easily just be destroyed if they ever do use nuclear weapons. But they seem like the first ones that would. But um,
I think
I
if
guess
Iran
that
had nuclear weapons, it would immediately use it on Israel. Well, I think, let me rephrase that. As soon as they feel the necessity to do it, they would use it on Israel, and they won't be afraid of using it. And I don't think they would be afraid of getting destroyed in the process either, because you got to think, this is how and I could be totally wrong, and fucking fingers crossed I am, but the way I understood the situation growing up, from being young in school, being told that, yeah, one day we're going to destroy that country, and
yeah,
this was our teachers coming to school and being like, yeah, one day we're gonna get him.
yeah,
And you know the whole general
but
like psyop that's going on there as well, and you can talk about the the current war that's happening and everything. But forget that. This is just people in a country just waiting to destroy another country. That's a legitimate thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the way I look at it is that Iran, the vibe I get is that these guys, it's imagine having a suicide bomber in the format of one of the most powerful governments in the world, right?
Right. Yeah, they don't care at all, even though they know that they'll probably be nuked to fucking
I don't
if
think they care at all.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they care because I think that ultimately, if they legitimately believe the faith that they do, which sometimes you never know. You never know if they're just doing it as like a front to sort of, it's like a virtue signal between them, or if they actually believe it. But if they really believe it, they'll be like, it's what Khomeini said. Khomeini was the leader of the revolution in 1978/9. And when the Iran-Iraq war happened, just a year after that in 1980, which lasted 7.5 years, and this was a fucking disaster. Like millions of people died, basically over nothing. Like nothing actually got achieved from it. Although it did weaken Saddam in the long run and caused for his ruin because of how much money he owed to Kuwait and all the other countries that he borrowed money from to fight off Iran.
Yeah.
Khomeini said that if you shoot them and if you kill them, you'll go to heaven. If they kill you, you'll go to heaven. You've got nothing to lose of the war. And that mindset, I worryingly believe that the whole government believes that. And this is a government that's in charge of nukes. Now, come and try and salvage this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now they just killed 3 U.S. soldiers, I think, just on the border to Syria, Iraq, if I'm not mistaken. And the U.S. are gonna have to respond, and
Yeah.
shit's gonna hit the fan. This happened just last night, so there may have been more developments at the time this podcast comes out. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kicking off.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
kicking
mean,
off.
the problem is that you got this kind of mind virus in the Islamic world that has created this, like if you think about the Islamic world, even though they subjugated and stuff like that vast amounts of the world,
Mm.
at least in the past with the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Empire and all that stuff, like there was a kind of weird semi-tolerance that they had for other, like they had like a lot of different cultures and different things in their midst. There was a lot less of this idea that we need to like murder every single person who doesn't believe what we, that really all started, right, from my understanding, with, I mean, you had that earlier in the religion, but particularly when the Wahhabi movement started, right,
Yeah.
and that so this is relatively a newer movement within Islam of a kind of this kind of fundamentalist. It kind of started around the same time as religious fundamentalism in the United States as well. They're almost kind of parallel movements of this kind of fundamentalism for whatever reason. It's kind of bizarre that I mean, literally they both started around the same time. But
Yeah. I mean, Wahhabi is still fairly modern, of course.
yeah, and this kind of mindset has like spread, and William Burroughs always talk about like the kind of mind virus or word viruses, and I kind of see these ideas as kind of like a virus. It's a disease that's spreading throughout the Middle East that everywhere it touches, it starts to spread and causes this kind of insanity. You know what I mean? Like these people are insane. They're like rabid animals. They don't if you believe in this kind of bullshit to the point that you don't care if you're gonna go blow yourself up and kill like children and stuff, like you're a rabid animal, really, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Well, this is one thing that always kind of grinds my gears, and to me, it just reeks of ignorance. Is terms like Islamophobia or good Muslim versus bad Muslim. It's sort of like it's such an uneducated opinion when people start throwing stuff like that around, because As far as I am concerned, and again, this is coming from someone who was born and raised in an Islamic country, and are there some values to the religion? Of course, it's great for discipline, no doubt, and discipline is something that I absolutely love. I think it's the most important quality of life, if not, one of the most. But the issue with Islam is when you say someone's a good Muslim, usually that indicates that they're not a Muslim that follows the faith completely. So
Yeah.
usually it means that it's someone that sort of, like nitpicks, but then they still have their own judgment. But then a bad Muslim is someone that actually does what the faith tells them to do. And this is why a term like Islamophobia, like the meaning of the word phobia, is an irrational and unreasonable fear of something. Whereas I don't think that having any kind of fear or resentment towards a faith that stands against basic human rights and decency is anything but reasonable.
Yeah.
So, and I think that um, and
Well, I
I
think that
think,
I've heard that one of my friends, he works for like, Islamic terrorist watchdog groups and stuff like that. And he had told me that a lot of that kind of Islamophobia stuff was created by the Muslim Brotherhood, because their whole idea was to like kind of like they've talked about how they can like use the idiot like kind of leftists like, to further their own agenda essentially. So a lot of those ideas are kind of spread by the, Muslim Brotherhood and other type of things to try to create this kind of word in the same way that, like nowadays, you know, the thing with like certain particularly you look at like communism, fascism, all these types of ideas, they utilize labeling. If you can label somebody with something that creates a negative impression in people, then you've already won, right? So that's why
yeah,
they always try to use the word you're a fascist, or you're a Nazi, or you're an Islamophobic. It's all just bullshit. Basically, half the time the people that are calling those things aren't those things, and but if they just use these kind of like labels and they can just label these people something, then they've already like dehumanized that person basically and turned them into the enemy.
not only that, but that also, in the case of some people, that dictates other people's opinions. And what do I mean by that? It's that, let's say you have an opinion about something and you're sort of rational about it and you're just trying to understand things, and then someone comes out of nowhere and then says, "You're a Nazi for thinking that." And of course, whatever it is that you're thinking actually has nothing to do with National Socialism or being a Nazi, legitimate Nazi. But because you don't want to be associated with that, you're like, well, I don't want to be called that. What the fuck? I'm not a Nazi. So you automatically abandon that thought process, even though that thought process has nothing to do with being a Nazi, and it's this is on one hand, words lose their meaning, which is a terrible thing to happen, because then there are also people that have very extreme views that are, that can be very dangerous, just as much as everything else we're talking about. But then rather than focus on those people, you're just making this generalization for people who just want to think clearly and be more critical of things. And it's a terrible thing. It's a scary situation, and this is where common sense completely goes out of the window, because people stay quiet in the fear of, oh, I don't want to be called that. Like I'm at that point now where I have enough confidence in what I believe in that if someone called me something that I'm not, it's not going to bother me. I'm just going to say, whatever, fuck you. If that's what you want to call it, it's probably a reflection of you anyway.
Yeah.
But not many people feel that way, and I recognize that. And it's sort of why the space for free speech is so precious and important, especially at a time like this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people worry about what people call them, right?
Mm.
And there are legitimate worries because you could, if you could end up getting, doxxed by a bunch of idiots and your life ruined. Like that is a possibility,
It's
which
true.
is scary. But at the same time, like you got to think too that like the other thing that happens when you're talking about all that too is that a lot of people, what I've noticed happening a lot is that there's a lot of people who are like, well, because I don't agree with these people, are just gonna call me a Nazi, and so they don't. They're like, well, I guess I'm a Nazi then, or whatever. You know, what I mean, they just kind of
Yeah,
like roll with it, and then they become more accepting of actual Nazis. You know what I mean? So it's like
very true. Yeah,
that's something I've noticed, which I think, and then that just confuses the issue because then you got people going, well, you just accept like these real Nazis. They're like, well, it's because you're gonna call me a Nazi anyways, right? You know, so I think you can see that happen even with like, say, the Trump elections, for example, a few years ago. Like, I think there's a lot of
right.
people who are not, most definitely not Nazis, who just were kind of like overlooked the fact that there were real Nazis at those rallies because they're like, like you're all gonna, that's what you all calling us anyway, so whatever, you know what I mean? So I do think you can see that kind of stuff happening, and then the funny part about that process is that the the leftist Antifa type people who are trying to attack Nazism are actually kind of creating it. They're radicalizing people,
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, by calling everybody a Nazi who doesn't agree with you, then those people are going to be like, well, let's see what real Nazis think. And then next thing you know, they're radicalized. And I actually think that that stuff is spreading because of the leftists in their attempt to fight it. They're actually just spreading it, which is kind of in general a trait of a lot of those types of things. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've always noticed that with certain types of political movements where if they're so anti something, they usually at their core are the same thing as that thing. Like
Yes,
really in reality, fascists and Nazis are not. I mean, fascists and communists are really just two sides of the same coin, right? And that's why they hate each
absolutely.
other so much. And they're both intolerant. They only want themselves to be in power because they're totalitarian systems. So it's like they're both about you know, I mean, and that pisses communists off because they're like, well, we're not, but you're like, yes, you are though. I mean, your whole your whole. I mean, and in my opinion, at this point in time, we've had plenty of time to see how communism is a failure. No country that exists even China is not a true communist country anymore, right? They haven't been for a long time because communism doesn't work in a modern society. They all have to accept some amount of capitalism, right? And every single communist country also is essentially a totalitarian country, right?
Yeah.
And have no, and they're like completely amoral, and they have no problem with lying to people, rewriting history, doing all this stuff, right? Anybody at this point, in my opinion, who still thinks that communism is a valid form of government is kind of an idiot, you know.
No, but it's
And
true. It's true, and it's a scary truth because there's this, like you say, how both are the same size of the are different sides of the same coin. I mean, I couldn't agree with that anymore. But what scares me is when you see how people get to openly embrace one, but then the other one, you're not even allowed to think it. Like they try and get into your thoughts. That like they're making sure that you don't think a certain way, and that's a scary fucking thing, man. That's like almost like an Orwellian thing that we're just on the tip of. I mean, I remember, in the UK, certain cities that you go to that are a little bit more, well, not a little bit more, but kind of like on the far left, and you see traces of that a lot in cities, especially like I would probably say Manchester's pretty bad for that. I mean, on one hand, people promote it saying, "Oh, it's this really diverse place and it's amazing." They'll say the same about Brighton, but then it's got the worst homeless problem, it's got terrible crime problem, and it's got all these fucking issues. And generally, those are the kind of places that you'll walk around, and then every now and then you'll see a hammer and sigil, like a sticker in public, or someone's put up a poster, and no one bats an eye. And it's like you guys have fucking lost it completely.
yeah, well, I mean, that is the general sign of some far left city is it's usually a shithole. You know what I mean? Like you look at all the cities in the United
Yeah.
States that are far left are all shitholes. Like Portland, Seattle, even Denver. Like downtown Denver is kind of a shithole now. Like
Yeah.
um, and as I don't know why. I mean, it's like, why are you guys so incapable of actually running your shit? But it's just and yet you're so. I think part of it's like if you're so consumed by what other people were thinking and how you can be the policeman of everybody else's thoughts. You know, maybe you just don't have enough brain power to actually be able to like live your life. You know what I mean? Like because you're
It's
just like so consumed by other people. You know?
the 100%. It's weaponized ideology, meaning that, or rather, weaponized identity, because you're so wrapped up in trying to change the world when your own life's a fucking mess. You're basically getting taken advantage of, because it's not like, like, let's say the whole woke thing, that didn't just come out of nowhere because of one blue-haired person in America. That was an ideology that was implemented externally and fed through and just trap fed, and then obviously it got hold of the education systems, and then now you see the implications of that. It's almost like a deep state of its own now, which is just this it's not quite the deep state, but it's this thing that just has its roots and claws inside everything within society over here, and what's attached to it is this cancerous ideology that's got no logic or reason attached to it, and whatever it is that they're trying to make a point for, it's always a good-hearted thing on the surface. This is the thing I'll admit as well. It's always something that seems like a really nice idea. And it's like, oh yeah, well, of course we should have that. Of course we should have security for people. Of course we should do this. Of course we should. Like, it makes sense why we would want to go in that direction, but then the solution is always crooked. And at the end of the day, all it really feeds is this totalitarian machine that just keeps evolving, and it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, all you can hope for is that at some point, I think the holes are starting to show with a lot of that stuff, because it is insane, and eventually a lot of those types of things will, drive people a certain portion of populations away. But I think that the damage is definitely done in a lot of ways, and unfortunately, you can look at. I feel bad for everybody in the UK because I mean, like stuff like the hate speech law in Ireland or all this stuff. I mean, it's scary shit. Like I mean,
Yeah.
because like I feel bad for people over there because I mean, and on top of that, you got the government's completely incompetent from what I can tell, and it's just like, I mean, it's not, Britain's UK is going towards ruin essentially right now. It's kind of sad to see. I mean, because it used to be a country that, I mean, it used to be a world power, and now it's like, I mean, what's going on? You know what I mean? It's just kind of sad.
It's an interesting point because, this, I have to tread carefully here what I say
Yeah.
because people could really take this the wrong way. Um, Especially knowing where I come from, but honestly, it took me by surprise when I first came here. A lot of things took me by surprise.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is, as well, I went straight to Birmingham, which is a little bit more closer to the reality of what it's really like to live in the UK. Because
Yeah.
I had already visited here prior to that, but then the areas and the conditions that I was in was fucking awesome. It was great. I had a brilliant time for 2 weeks with lots of people that I met whilst I was here, and I got to do my first series of record shopping, so it was really exciting for me to really be able to experience that. But man, it's not what I thought it would be, and it has this sort of image outside of the country. Now look at it like this, I'm extremely grateful to have had the opportunities that I've had. I am extremely grateful that I actually got to play live without getting fucking arrested for it. But there is a part of me that recognizes very similar patterns of behavior as the government that I once grew up with. And I'm like, how far away is it for it to become like that? Like, how far away is it for the government here to become just like the one in Iran? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years? Because in many ways, it's headed in exactly the same direction. And then this sort of dawned on me in a much more extreme and violent form of awakening in the last few years where I was like, oh shit, okay, so people are having parties at their house and you're going and arresting them and charging them money. That's what the Iranian government used to do because it's not halal to have a party. And I'm like, okay, shit, you've already gone there. And it's just a matter of time before more of either that ideology takes over or you have a social credit score system in place and you have to show your ID to be able to go past the gates at a supermarket just so you can buy something with your fucking stupid like cashless wallet or whatever, and there you go, you're fucked. We're completely fucked it, and that's the thing that really terrifies me, and it's the thing that I hope we can come together to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a strange thing, like in England, but I think that that whole area has always had a kind of a kind of case system. You have the working class, the upper class, all this stuff. So what essentially what's going to happen is going to be like the upper class people who got money, they'll have one way of life, and then they're going to try to. I mean, I look at it that essentially like stuff like the World Economic Forum and stuff is trying to create a modern feudalism. I think they want to return to feudalism where everybody is basically the slaves to the rich. That's essentially what I see coming. Because the reason why is just because I think that, I mean, it's kind of weird though, because I don't know what they're expecting to happen, because I think the ultimate issue with that is that they're coming from an ultra capitalist type of mindset. Like everybody, they want all the money, all this stuff. But at the same time, they've kind of reverted back to this kind of feudalistic, like we're the guys and people in power, like we are going to tell you what to do and you're going to like it or whatever, right? Like I think that the problem is those two things can't really go together, because capitalism is what took down this type of feudalistic modernistic type of systems, oligarchies and stuff like that. So you can't really have both existing. So if you try to create a kind of modern feudalism where people don't own anything and they're happy and all the stuff like they say, you're going to destroy capitalism, right? And in that process, you're going to destroy your own wealth, because you need people to. Capitalism actually does require a kind of system that like we have, the whole idea of liberty and freedom and all this types of stuff, that kind of conflict of ideas and everything, that's all inherent to the system, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you could look at China, but I mean, the thing with China is that even though, yeah, they're very powerful right now, I don't think that's going to last forever. They have so few women being born in that
Population
country.
crash. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
that people don't see it now, but give it 100 years, I mean, China's going to be crippled,
Yeah,
because
but then by
because
that point they'll have already been replaced by by AI systems easily.
right.
The idea is not gonna go away. They realize that the flesh don't last forever, but computers do. So they already know that, and I wouldn't find any peace in the idea that China's going away. No, not whatsoever. That could actually mean something a lot worse
Right. Oh, like
than
just
what
create
it
like
seems.
some fucked up AI system or whatever. But yeah, I
There you
mean,
go.
there's a lot of I mean, reality is that I'm just glad that I'm probably only gonna be alive for not too much long, maybe another 50 years at most. But a
Hmm.
lot of horrible shit could happen in that 50
I
years. So
don't I don't. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way at all. I used to, but then it just kind of felt like sort of incomplete to me, And for a long time, I thought that, well, fuck it, I'll probably be dead by so and so year anyway, so it doesn't matter what happens after because I won't experience it. And then it's like, yeah, but the world that you're a part of still carries on, and especially if you're someone who has children, even if you don't have children, parts of you will still exist in that world. But you know what? Be the fucking worst thing that would happen is, especially you and I, we're talking over Zoom right now. They've already got the fucking access to our faces and voices and shit. If they can somehow bring you back from the dead and then you're still trapped in that system anyway, right? That would be the worst thing that could ever happen in the entirety of the world, and there would be no reverse button. We would all just be trapped souls, and there's nothing we can do to fix it other than make sure, I guess, we never go there. I don't know, but this is the thing that I think about as well, just to kind of like just pull back the fishing rod a little bit. One interesting analogy and realization that I kind of had recently was that it's crazy to me when you've got a lot of, especially younger people, saying things like, "Oh, I hate the monarchy, fuck the royal family, I hate them." Yet at the same time, the same people will be pushing for a globalist idea or a globalist agenda. Because, now, let me unpack that for you, why that's crazy. To me, you're saying that you're against the idea of an unelected select few elites ruling over the masses and having access to the resources and getting a say on things, yet you're okay with the same thing happening on a global level, where a few unelected elites have access to resources and rule over the masses. It's a fucking crazy idea to me, because it's essentially the same thing. Globalism is worship of global royals, not just countries, not just empires, the entire fucking world. And it's crazy to me, the mental gymnastics it must take for some people, or rather the lack of awareness and understanding and intellect to really get, oh no, it's just the same thing but on a much larger scale, and the consequences are a lot worse. And I'm not making a stance or an argument for monarchy either, like one of the reasons why Iran went to shit was because of monarchy. That's one of the reasons why it ended up at the bullshit theocracy it is at now, which is, again, still worse than a monarchy. But it's an interesting thing when you think about it, that it's just the same thing on a larger scale, which is far more detrimental to human existence, yet it's a thing that we're pushing for somehow.
Yeah, I mean, well, like you can poke holes in a lot of those people's ideas in the same way. Pretty much almost everything they say, you can basically be like, you're hating one thing but advocating the same thing, And it is a kind of, I find it baffling, dude. I found it very confusing, the way that a lot of these people think, for as long as I first became aware of this type of idiot mindset, like, I've always just found it like very, just like confusing. Like, I'm just like, I mean, I guess I shouldn't, though, because I do realize that a lot of people don't have any type of self-awareness. And if you don't have any self-awareness, then you don't have the ability to realize, to actually look at your thoughts critically. A lot of people don't have critical thinking skills. They don't have, I was reading a thing about behavioral, about like development, like child development, like how the brain develops, right? And it was a paper written by all these like scientists, and they're saying that when they can grasp that critical thinking needs to be taught children basically as young, for the whole lives. Like, they need to be taught critical thinking when they're children, like little children, like elementary school. And they said that people who aren't taught critical thinking at a very young age will never actually be able to critically think in a real way, even though they're taught critical thinking when they're older. It's just like they're not really taught. They still don't 100% critically think, because you have to have those types of things kind of like implemented in the brain early on, right? So I thought it was very interesting. And you can kind of see that because, critical thinking has been very much something that has been eliminated from most schools nowadays. And you can see that with a lot of younger generations. They obviously don't have the ability to critically think. They just kind of accept stuff that they're told,
Yeah.
and parrot it out, and they don't seem to think about stuff. And if you try to challenge them to think, they get mad, because I think on some level they're just not equipped to actually think about the things they're saying. You know what I mean?
Don't know if I ever told you this before, but this kind of puts a smile on my face because it reminds me of kind of a cool, powerful childhood memory that I've got. I believe I was around 7 years old at that time. Although this was something that then carried on for a long time, and I don't know why I was like that, but I remember going into my school on this particular day. And this was, yeah, so this is primary school. I'm only like 7, 8 years old. And I walked through the gate of my school, and then you sort of like went through this gate, and then it was the main yard for the school, which was massive. Like that's generally how schools in Iran are shaped. Where you've got this giant yard, and then you've got the building next to it. And I remember walking through the gate to go into the yard, and in front of me there was an American flag on the floor with two kids stood on both sides. And I got to it, and instinctively I stepped over so I wouldn't be stepping on the flag, because to me it was a disrespectful thing to do that.
Oh,
Now,
dude, you just cut out completely. Like,
oh
shit just
yeah,
paused. The last thing I heard you say was something about a garden. So in your school.
okay, sure, yeah, it seems to be back on now. Cool,
Yeah,
cool,
it's back now.
glad it's back on. Yeah. So as I was saying, so you've got the gate, and then as you go through the gate, I remember going through, and then there was an American flag on the floor, right?
Mm.
With two kids from the older classes stood next to it. And me being me, even as a child, I immediately, as soon as I saw the flag, I didn't even think. Immediately, I just put my foot over it so I wasn't stepping on the flag, because for some reason I liked America, and I didn't want to disrespect the flag. But then the kids next to me, as soon as I did that, they were like, "Oh, what are you doing? Take a step back. You have to step on the flag on the way in. They're infidels, this and that, blah, blah, blah." I was like, okay, then. So I just kind of really gently just scraped my shoe on the flag, and then walked away. But then I don't know why, but I just always had that in me. Even back then, I was just like, I don't know. Like, my family never said things like that to me. They never said like, oh, you should respect America and fuck the current government. No one ever told me anything like that. We never had anything like that in the family. But somehow, as a 7-year-old, you're mentioning critical thinking. I don't know where this came by, but I made a very clear decision within a split second. I don't want to step on that flag because I like it and respect it. You know?
Yeah, I do think that there's some people who naturally do have that. Like their brains are just, for whatever reason, they just have that capability. But you definitely see there's a lot of other people who don't. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, for
and if they're
sure.
not, and if they don't have it naturally, and then if they're not taught it at any point, they're not really taught it in school, or they're even worse, the opposite, they're being indoctrinated in school. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I
that's
mean
what
it's a
creates those kind
scary
of
thing,
fanatics.
like what a fucked up thing to do to children, right? I mean, they used to make us do all these chants, and this wasn't the only school. Like a couple of years later, when I moved to a much bigger school, I think this was so when I was like 9 years old, which in Iran at the time that would have been third grade, because we used to start school at 7. Now they've changed it back to sort of like a more modernized Western way of you start at 6 and so on. But anyway, I remember me and my friends always used to fuck around, because I had the idea that when they would say death to USA, death to Israel, we would just name random countries at the same time as the other kids. So whenever they were saying death to USA, death to Israel, I would be like, death to Zimbabwe, death to Afghanistan. Just like naming random countries, because we thought it was funny. But yeah, it's a crazy thing, and I don't know how the fuck I survived their psyop for so many years, but I guess I kind of did, huh?
Yeah, I think you just had that. Like I said, I think some people are naturally just like they're just because you do think that the brain is to a certain amount wired from birth, right? And then as
Mm.
you grow up, it starts to wire in certain ways depending on what kind of stimuli you have.
Mm.
And so I think some people are just wired a certain way where they're just like, yeah, like some people are very weak-willed, some people are very strong-willed. I think a lot of that is from birth. I'm more, you look at nature versus nurture. I think the reality is both. I think both things are true. I think we are born a certain way. Our brains are, who we are on a spiritual level, physical, mental, on terms of the brain, flesh, like we're born a certain way, but then there is nurture is another side of it. What you experience in your life, the way that you were raised, all this stuff also has an effect. I think both things are true at one time. I think the idea that it's a either or is kind of an idiotic distinction. I think you can't say that it's only nature or only nurture. It has, it's both. I mean, to me, so I think some people
Yeah.
are just born. Yeah, we're all born with certain gifts, and that kind of is the idea of like, I believe in equal rights to all people, but I think the idea of equality is kind of idiotic. We're not all equal. We're not all the same.
Mhm.
We should all have equal rights to live our lives, but we're not. I don't. I'm very, very against. Oh, is that I forgot the word. Um, where everybody's supposed to have the same thing. Like that kind of mindset. Like
Mhm.
I've known people who believe that everybody, nobody should be ahead of anybody. Everybody should be, you know, the same. Like nobody should be, I'm trying to, I can't, I'm forgetting the word, but it's this
Well,
kind of
it's
idea.
there's a,
Yeah.
there's a clear difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. I think that's what it really comes down to. And only the inferior demand that they are equal to others, because those who make their own achievements, they've got no need to do that. And yes, people should have the right to, let's say, in the example of modern society, get offered job interviews, get offered opportunities to do things. Absolutely, of course, get the opportunity to be able to afford at least a living wage and be able to, feed themselves and their family without any sort of discrimination. I think, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
but that also doesn't mean that the person who is working their ass off, is trying to run five different businesses, and is spending all of their time and efforts and energy creating things to then be equal to another person who, I don't know, just works a minimum wage job. That's the truth of it, and no one is equal. Nature never creates equals, like the idea of that type of equality that you want to talk about, when it's so literal, it just doesn't comply with the laws of nature, simply put. Like if
Yeah.
I had an equal, if I had someone else who was exactly me, like they had the same voice, same skills, I don't know, same bank account, same everything, I would probably kill them, because I'd be like, how dare you? I'm the only one. You know,
Right.
that idea that I told you earlier, that God's always trying to like battle itself. I see that in that, because I know how I think. And I've got lots of friends, and I've got lots of love and respect for all of my friends. But if there was someone who was exactly me, I'd be like, yo, what the fuck, that I wouldn't be cool with that at all, because I am completely at peace with the fact that I'm the only one of me in the world. And so it's kind of like you're no one, but then you're everyone at the same time, and that's a peaceful idea to me. But I think a lot of people are so nervous about the map of their own lives and who they are and where they come from, they could never grasp that ideas, and therefore I feel they strive for that artificial, unrealistic version of equality. At least that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a forced version of equality. Yeah. I personally, I think that, I don't know. I guess it's always hard for people to be an individual, it's very easy for people to just be part of the herd, I guess, but I think that, for example, for people like us who are, I mean, particularly if you really truly believe in the ideals of black metal and all this stuff, like you're not gonna be afraid to be an individual, right? Like you're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
afraid to stand out from. You shouldn't be, if you're afraid of that kind of stuff, then you probably shouldn't be involved with this types of things, or you know the left hand path and all this kinds of stuff, right? Like because it's like this is a pathway for individual self-realization and development and separating yourself from the herd, from God, from all this stuff, right? So I
So are
think
you
that
saying to me that you're really upset that Dawn Raid broke up?
no. But
Right on.
I think that no, in fact, the opposite. I remember posting about how great it was they broke up because I hate them.
Nice.
But the
Please carry on. Don't let me interrupt you there. But yeah, I just thought that was funny to
but yeah,
interject.
like I think that you have to be unafraid to stand out. Unafraid to. You have to have integrity and not worry people are going to call you names or do all this stuff or whatever is going to happen. You just got to be yourself and be able to stand alone if you need to. And I think I kind of, for me, that's just who I am, I guess, in a way. I've always been like that,
Mm.
always kind of been my own person in a way, if that makes sense. Like I'm never like too worried about how I fit in with like a group of people or something. Like I've always kind of been the outsider in any group I'm. If you go to like the goth club, I don't fit in with the goth people. I'll go to the metal stuff. I probably fit in a little bit more, but I'm still a little bit outside in a way. And from the general metal guy type of people. So
Mm.
I'm okay with that. I don't mind. In my opinion, I am who I am. So I've always
Yeah.
had that kind of mentality, and I think the stronger you are in that, um, you're kind of separated somewhat from all other stuff. And I think you get a little clarity too when you're like looking at the stuff we've been talking about or look at a lot of stuff. If you're kind of standing outside of it to a certain degree, you also have a certain level of clarity because you're not being overruled by these kind of passions that other people are in terms of like, you know, like I don't know, people have these like kind of knee jerk reactions to certain things or whatever. I think it's good to kind of get past those types of things and kind of cut yourself off from being as much as possible from being manipulated. Like it's really important to start to really look at how the world around us manipulates us at all times. Realizing that there are certain things that they try to do and like advertising, marketing, things like that to
Yeah.
trigger certain those types of knee jerk reactions. I think it's good to start like to really. I think it's really important for people to become aware of those things, become self aware, and to start to learn that you can kind of deprogram those things. Like you don't need to be reacting to those types of things. Like you can. And I've always thought that black metal was inherently, in a way, that kind of thing because if you look at the way black metal has always been something that goes after the transgressive types of ideas and a lot of black metal people just kind of have this kind of like, well, like they're very like they don't react to things the way normal people do, right? They're not like, oh, that's horrible. No, it's like, yeah, it's black metal, right? So
I'm
I've
laughing
always
because this reminds me of something really fucked up that happened a few years ago.
what's
I'm
that?
100% with you, by the way. What you're saying is beautiful, man. That's sort of my general ethos when approaching anything in life, is that you get to be yourself. And it can be a lonely place, but it's the most powerful, it's the most valuable. But the reason why I'm laughing is so I've kind of been on that train of thought for years at this point, where I am sort of desensitized, and I don't get taken on by random articles and reels and things like that. It's very hard to pull me in onto things like that and get me invested in some shit that I don't care about because I understand the value of my attention and my thoughts and my feelings, and I dedicate it to things that I care about rather than just being pulled away at every direction by the world. And I remember this was when I was still living in Yorkshire, and this lady who had just come and joined my department, she was very much like, God, how do I say this without sounding horrible? She was a very simple, basic NPC kind of a person from Yorkshire, right? That's the
Right,
best I
yeah.
can. That's the most respectful way I can put it. Because she wasn't a bad person. She was just an NPC. That's all, right? So
Yeah.
one time she said something, and this is one of them things. If you know me and if people have known me and they know what I'm like in person, they'll understand why. I reacted like that. But she just turned out of nowhere in the middle of a shift, and she's like, in a really strong Yorkshire accent, like, oh my god, this news is right horrible. This baby's been fucking, like, suffocated to death by its own mother. And I turned around and I said, I don't care. and then she just looked at me. She was like, well, that's a bit fucking nasty. Like in her Yorkshire accent, and she was not happy with me at all. And I was just like, I don't care. You read something on your phone. Fuck off, I don't care. So that's one of them things, and it's like, yeah, of course, yeah, it's a terrible thing if that actually happened. Yeah, 100%. But I don't need to pay attention to everything and get reeled in by every single thing that just comes at me, and it's good to have that boundary. You don't need to question your humanity if stuff like that comes at you. Doesn't mean you have to be cynical all the time either. No, but just understand that emotions are a resource and just spend it where it matters is all I'm saying.
Yeah. It's an economy of the economy of emotions and feelings, right? Like I don't waste a lot of my emotions on people who don't deserve it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're not gonna be like get all upset about something when there's really, that you're just trying to be like caught into it. Or even people, like, a lot of times, this might sound funny, like, but when I used to work in like a job where I had to deal with people a lot more, a lot of the other people were like, why don't you get angry at people even when they're like assholes? I'm like, because I just don't give for me, as soon as they walk out of the door, they're dead to me. I just forget about them. I'm not going to get mad at them. Why am I going to invest my emotion and my time in getting angry at this person because they got their drink wrong or whatever? You know what I mean?
Exactly. I sometimes get fired up by it. If someone's an asshole, I'm like, nice. Like it kind of like wakes me up almost, because I find normal day-to-day jobs kind of boring. So if someone's an asshole, it almost like it doesn't make me happy as such, but it just kind of excites me a little bit. I'm like, all right, cool.
Right.
We got something
breaks
here.
Up the monotony. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it just kind of wakes you up a little.
Yeah, and I just don't let them bother me. People would be like, "What do you mean?" Like, I was like, "Well, I just forget about them," And I kind of trained my brain to just kind of like, particularly at my old job, where I would just like go in, I do my work, walk out, and I just forget the whole day. I just wouldn't even think about work. I did not take work home with me at all. So it was like, I think in a way you have to be that way because you just let everything like eat at you. And because I worked for people who get so angry and they just ruin their whole day and they just be bitching about it all day. And then just be like, I would just tell them, I was like, just let it go. Like,
yeah,
you can't do anything about it.
There's nothing more pathetic for a man in general, I think, than to be bothered and upset and angry and disturbed by the smallest of things all the time. And you see this a lot with especially older men who are really insecure. Like you'll see some dad who's completely out of shape wearing a t-shirt saying don't fuck with me, and it's like, what are you gonna do, and it's like, and it's like no one ever said anything in the first place, but people who kind of constantly project out and they're always upset and they're always stressed out. Oh, my missus this and that. It's like, fuck off, like it's not a good quality at all. It makes you look it makes you look like a loser. If everything's gonna get you, everything's gonna make you upset, everything has a stronghold on your emotions, then you just don't have that masculine trait at all. And that's something that you need to go work on, and I say this to my friends. I'm like, if I see them getting easily frustrated, that's something I say, hey man, that's not a good look. You could do better. Obviously, I only say this to like really close friends who I see acting like that, and it's true. And listen, anger is a powerful emotion and you can use it in very positive ways, and sometimes it's necessary. But to let every single thing in the world have a stronghold on it, like I said, it's a resource. You can't just be giving it out freely over nothing. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, I guess I was also raised with a kind of older idea of what masculinity should be and that kind of stuff. So to me, like, the kind of guys that you know I saw was these guys that they didn't get angry at just everything. You know what I mean? Like they had this kind of like, you know, but you knew that they could handle it. If somebody did something, they wouldn't be afraid to use violence and they need to, but they're also at the same time not the guy who's going to resort to that necessarily, you know what I mean? But they're also not going to sit there and bitch and complain all the time. To me, that was the kind of man that I thought that you should aspire to as a man, is like you shouldn't be bitching about everything all the time and
Yeah,
complaining and acting like a fool and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like to me, like men, you know, to me, like anger should be something that should only you should utilize. If it arises, it should only be because it's something that really deserves being angry about. And that's the thing. Like people always tell me, they're like, when you get angry, it's scary because you're not really angry most of the time. You're pretty calm, but when you get angry, it's like really scary. I'm like, well, that's because like it takes a lot to push me to that point. You know what I mean?
mm.
And but I think that is how, I don't know. I just think that to me, masculinity is not about uh posturing and being an asshole and stuff, right? Like it's not
It's the
like a lot of those
opposite.
kind of yeah, a lot of those kind of guys who are like that are actually very insecure about their masculinity.
Yeah,
The guys who are actually
exactly.
secure and are like confident in themselves as a man generally are the last guys. The last guys to get in fights, the last guys to do stuff, but they're also the guys who will whip your ass if you fucking fuck with them. You know what I mean? Like, and I
Yeah.
just think that that's how it comes down to, is you have to be powerful, but you shouldn't be utilizing your power like on every little thing. You know?
The whole idea of masculinity, as far as I'm concerned, and my understanding of it, based on the example that I had in my life, is that you provide a safe haven and you provide um, a steady base where people get to express themselves, people get to have maybe sometimes certain conflicts, but it means that you still keep the ship running and you still maintain patience and control. And this is one of the things that, just to kind of as we wrap things up here as well, why I think it's so valuable to be in a relationship, because it's a constant game and a test in a really positive way, in that you get tested. Women are very good at doing that, but that's an amazing thing because they're doing that by the basis of evolution, just to see, first of all, if you can hold your shit together. And if you learn to control yourself, if you learn to control your emotions and still only just look at solutions, that becomes, I think it's one of the best ways to build your own intelligence, if anything. Because if you're able to, because the thing is as well, when someone's your partner, they'll know you better than everyone else. So if they really want to test you, they'll say things that probably hurt you the most as well, or at least challenge
Yeah.
you the most. You know what I mean? That's why it's
Yeah.
good. It's kind of like there's no better mirror than being in a relationship. But what's
Y-
so beautiful about it is that if you learn to really navigate that, and then if you learn to not get bothered by it, and rather than react out of anger constantly and get upset and emotional, rather than just let it sit and think about it and then say what feels right, you become a better person. I think to me it's like an exercise. You constantly get better, you constantly improve, and that emotional tenacity that you've got gets stronger and stronger as you go along as well. So again, the idea of masculinity, like you put very well, it's not about being a show off or like an asshole. It's about being able to provide a safe haven where you're able to provide solutions and create a real safe space, not the fake one, but
yeah.
rather a real safe space for the people around you.
Yeah. And it's interesting you're talking about the relationship side of things. Jung always said that the only way that you can really truly test psychological work, for example, is in a relationship with your partner, because
Mm.
it's primarily in friendship stuff we project a lot. Some people project, do projections, stuff like that. But particularly when it comes to a sexual relationship with, the opposite sex or whatever, you're going to be projecting um, the kind of, you know, unaware person's generally caught up in projections. They're always projecting all this stuff on people. And of course, in Jungian psychology, a lot of it's about pulling out the projections so that you can actually like appreciate the person for who they really are instead of your projections on them. We said the only way that you can really test all this your kind of psychological spiritual growth is through a relationship with another person, because that person's going to hit on all the things that you are not, for example. And like you said, generally there's just something like in that where we open ourselves up in a way that we don't do necessarily like our friendships with men or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so it's only in that kind of reflection and that kind of confrontation with the opposites that you actually realize the spiritual growth you've undergone. That, that's what Jung always said, and I think that's true. My experience is very true.
Absolutely, and at the very top of it all, that's the principle that applies to trust. Because if you ever feel like you're in a situation where you can't trust the other person, all you got to do is look inside and realize actually you just can't trust yourself, because you know of the things that you think about and the things that you want to do. And you make the assumption that, oh, what if the other person does this too? And, that paranoia is fueled by your own shady behavior, I guess. That's why a lot of people who, accuse the other one of something, usually it's because they've done something themselves or they're planning on it, and that's it's a very, very interesting thing to kind of go down when you just start to sort of unpack the human psychology and behavior, really. And I bet
Yeah.
that's how Iran feels right now. They don't trust anyone and they want to nuke it, and they're like, we're going to get nuked. It's because they want to nuke everyone else. So that's
Yeah.
I
No,
guess that's one
definitely.
way we could wrap this.
Yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
definitely have seen that people are like you said, they look at their own shady behavior. I always look at relationships that I don't get suspicious. I decide, I trust you. I've decided to be in a relationship with you. I trust you implicitly, unless I see something to tell me otherwise. Like, and sometimes I'll get that feeling, but that's also I can trust my intuition with those types of things because I'm not always like projecting that on that person, right? You just have this intuition, like
Hmm.
something's weird. Like there's something about the way they're acting, like things are doing. And in my life, when I've gotten an intuition feeling, I start kind of digging into it. Generally expose that yeah, I was right to have that feeling. But
Yeah.
that's also different from that kind of projection of like, I'm not thinking about cheating on a person, so I'm not really worried about them cheating on me, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that's not really. I think there's a big difference between the kind of when you actually have that conversation with the intuition
Hmm.
and when you don't, because I think that's really important in life is to just be in conversation with the gut and trust it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is, man, it's always a gamble. It's a risk. I don't think there's any bigger gamble in life than a relationship, but I think it's a high risk, high reward situations, and sometimes it might not work out because, the scariest part of it is the fact that you can't control what the other person does, right? And you shouldn't
Yeah.
try to either. And
Yeah.
you influence it by mutual accord, right? But you don't control the other person. It's a whole other person that's a big part of your life, but you've got no control over what they do and say and what they think. Nothing. And that's God, that's a fucking scary thing to have. But listen, it's the way it goes, and it's also how you grow. And yeah, again, that intuition's a big part of it. But at the end of the day, a friend of mine, she was a Reiki healer. Quite a while ago, she told me they said that you just gotta trust yourself, and then the rest of it will sort itself out.
Yeah. I do think that's true. You trust yourself, you know that you as an individual have integrity and you operate with integrity, then you have a clear conscience, right? So if
Exactly.
you somebody else wants to do something fucked up, that's on them. But it's your if you can walk through life of the self knowledge that you have operated according to your own, with integrity, according to your own, I guess, ideals, right? Your ideas of what kind of man I want to be and walk through life, and the types of the type of honor that you have, which can be different for each different people. We all have some, every person has a slightly different set of that stuff. But I do think that
Hmm.
you have to. I think that that's a very important part that has kind of been eroded. But I think more people need to have is you need to have um, some rules for yourself. Like this is what I think is acting with honor and everything in life is, right? So that
Hmm.
I can exist with my own integrity. My word means something. A lot of these kind of older ideas that I think mean a lot less now, but I think it's kind of like a kind of revolt against that, to be like, no, like I believe my word should mean something, this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think that if you can walk through life with that, that was one of the things that I realized a long time ago with some spiritual practice was that um, when you die, the biggest issue is people who are consumed by regrets. They'll create that regret will turn into a hell for them. Essentially, this was an idea I had. I was like, so you need to pursue your life in such a way that you're not acting counter to your will, to who you are, to your integrity. And as long as you do that, then you can live your life with as few regrets as possible. We're all going to make mistakes in terms of, a forking path. You make the wrong choice. You make a choice. And you're like, man, that was the wrong choice, but you just have to learn from it. Right. But I mean, what I mean is acting in a way that dishonors you in some way that you like go against your principles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what the most important thing is to live your life with a clear set of principles and exist in it. And, some people maybe their principles is the lack of principle. They're like, I'm just going to be an agent of chaos, and that's fine. Whatever, whoever you are, that exists for you, that's what I think is important for each person. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the end of it, the thing is as well, you can't avoid uh, regret in life. So sometimes it's also just about choosing your regrets. All right.
yeah,
So do you think,
like I
okay,
said,
yeah.
yeah, you're gonna
So,
have one choice where you could go one way or the other, and you just try to make that right choice, and then maybe you have a regret that you made that choice, right? But if
mhm,
you act within the mindset that you made that decision with the best of your knowledge at the time, even if it didn't work out, I think that's a small regret, but you're not like completely like doing something fucked up, you know what I mean? Hopefully.
precisely. That's it, man. Carl, very powerfully put, man. This has been a really fun conversation. I feel like we probably could have gone for another 3 hours. I'll have to have you. I'll need to have you back on here at some point again, man. This was really fun.
Yeah, man. And we'll have you back on Sol Nox as well, and continue the crossover. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
awesome,
Anything
man.
you want our folks to check out that you're doing, whether it's with music or Sol Nox?
As of right now, I'm just doing. I have the podcast with Sol Nox, and then working on a new project, a musical project that should be coming out later on in the year, which is going to be it's a I'm doing with the guy Drew Goth from Australia, he's like a drummer, and we're doing
Okay,
it's kind of a war be still black metal thing. It's called um the project's called Antichrist Blood Scourge, and
cool.
yeah, the demo is going to be called Blood Hate Triumph. So it's gonna be like a 4 or 5 song EP. So that'll be coming
Right
out
on.
later on the year at some point. Details to be. I should hopefully. I need to like I have a friend who's doing a mix it and everything, so I need to send the first track to him to get mixed, and then I'll probably post that once that's done, so people can get a little taste of what that is. So that's going to be later for new music, and then I'm going to continue my process of releasing a lot of my old demos on the Bandcamp and everything, which I began last year. So that'll continue as the year goes on as well. So that's
Sounds
kind of what's going
terrific.
on right now. So
Awesome, man. Sounds very, very good. Excited to hear all that. And yeah, just keep smashing it with Sol Nox as well. It's cool to see how that whole thing is taken off the way it has done, and you're just pumping out content, and it's good too. So for anyone who's listening to this who's not listened to Sol Nox yet, I do recommend the podcast. Definitely.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I mean, the next episode, well, it might be already out by the time, I don't know when this episode's going up, but next
Should be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, so the episode that already come out will be the 100th episode. So, I've hit 100, which is cool. But that's also because I did end up going twice a week for a while, which will continue off and on depending on how ahead I am on stuff. But, try to cover a lot of different stuff. I always say to people that like I figured with the podcast format that I'm taking, the downside is that because I'm like covering a lot of different things depending on what I want to talk about, that I'm not going to have, like I feel like other podcasts where they have like a kind of steady concept can grow like a steadier, group of people are like, oh yeah, I like what they're talking about. If you're like a horror podcast or, you're just talking about a specific concept, but because I'm talking about a lot of different things, I realize that my show is going to be, there's going to be a small core group of people who are into everything. And then you're going to have, I've noticed this. I mean, it's been the way it is. Some episodes have tons of listens, some don't have any. It just depends. So,
But that has to do with the guests as well.
Yeah, the people I have on, all that stuff. But to me, that's okay. I'm just happy to go down. I do this because I want to do it. Really, I don't really worry too much about stats and stuff. I've long ago realized that we can strive to be successful in something, but at the same time, at a certain level, when it comes to this type of stuff, you just need to do it because you want to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
And you get satisfaction out of it.
That's exactly. Listen, man. That's the way to do anything. I think that's the way I approach doing Iblis. It definitely is, and it's the way I approach Trivax and everything else. And I couldn't imagine doing something for the sake of hitting numbers. Even as a fitness coach, I do it because I find it extremely rewarding to see how I can help change and transform another person around, and that's the thing that I find surreal, that oh wow, I help that person become better version of themselves by doing this, so it's like that, the satisfaction, the success is in doing it, all right, and it's in the journey, not the destination. You know the whole shtick. But but yeah, man, it's been a pleasure really having you on, and I look forward to seeing more of what you've got going on. And to everyone else who's been listening to the podcast as well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this chat. Let us know what you thought, and we'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.
Thank you.